Well, for more on how education institutions are capitalizing on entrepreneurship, I'm joined by Rhonda Shrader live from San Francisco. She's Executive Director of Berkeley-Haas Entrepreneurship Program. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, traditionally, when people thought of starting a business, MBAs were the path to go. But how does learning entrepreneurship as a student now compare with the hands-on experience in the real world?
Well, I think entrepreneurship skills are life skills. They are, how do you apply a scientific method to a problem? How do you break it down, form hypotheses, and go out and test them? So entrepreneurship education has evolved significantly over the past 10, 15 years, where students were sitting in classrooms building robust business plans that never got used. Now we train the students that there are no facts inside the building, that you need to go out and start talking to your customers from day one.
So what would you say are the main barriers to entrepreneurship that these sorts of programs help students overcome?
I think one of the biggest barriers is to find other students who are passionate about solving the same problem that you are, and also rounding out your skill set. As students, yes, there is diversity and we meet a lot of different people, but we tend to, kind of form in our own groups, whereas engineers hang out with engineers and maybe UX designers hang out with other UX designers. So that's a big barrier, is how do you actually connect all the pieces? Because after all, entrepreneurship is a team sport.
And so talk about some of the pitfalls and the challenges that student entrepreneurs should really watch out for as they embark on this.
I think being in love with your own idea, so confirmation bias, is something that we, repeatedly train and try to get out of our students. We train them to recognize it. We train them to, go out and do other experiments, to pivot if you have to. Don't fall in love with the idea. Fall in love with the problem that you're solving and how the customer wants that problem solved.
So then, in terms of these programs as well as these incubators, how much more successful are they making these startups? Obviously, you hear a lot of horror stories about the number of startups that fail. Are they making an impactful difference now?
I think they are, because I think they're helping to de-risk some of the difficulty about first starting up. Sometimes students don't always know what to prioritize or how to focus their efforts. And I think having a structured program and a curriculum within an incubator or accelerator definitely increases the propensity of success.
Now, what about the regions and the countries that are really leading on this, and who's falling behind? Who's not really supporting this entrepreneurship for students?
That's a great question, and not one I'm sure I have the answer to. I know Canada has done a great job with that, especially Ryerson. Their companies have generated millions of dollars in funding and thousands of jobs. And I think some of the other developing countries are now starting to catch up.
And so how are some of these programs, since they are increasing, what are they doing to differentiate themselves? And why now? Why are they increasing so quickly?
Well, I think students are demanding it. They want to have these immersive experiences, and I think that's one of the ways a school who is competing for talented students can differentiate themselves.
And what about the universities themselves? What do they get out of having these programs for entrepreneurship?
Well, universities invest a great deal in research, in filing IP. But that doesn't necessarily mean it is going to be commercialized. So I think there's that, plus just having an overall a richer student experience.
And also, with a lot of these schools, you obviously have these big alumni. Does that add an extra something when it comes to networking, being able to pitch and perhaps push yourself ahead further than the average startup that's kind of starting on its own?
I think it can, definitely. If you plug into a network, and especially with experts being so visible today on LinkedIn, there's no longer that barrier. Students can get to an expert fairly easily, and if they are an alum or if they have some sort of connection, they can definitely get to them more quickly than they could have even 5 or 6 years ago.
Now, we're going to have a bit of a reality check here. We know that the biggest success stories, your Zuckerbergs, your Jack Ma's, those are the ones that get the big headlines, as well as these huge failures. But what is the typical experience like for an entrepreneur in today's world?
Oh, that's very interesting. I think they'll start out with wanting to solve a good problem, just like the entrepreneurs in your previous segment. That was a terrific example, and clearly they have pivoted. They're probably not starting out with the same idea, or they're probably not using the same idea that they started out with. So I think the ability to pivot correctly and effectively is a big factor in what makes something successful or not.
And very quickly, what's the biggest mistake that you see new entrepreneurs make?
Taking money before they're ready. I think taking money and feeling like you're validated before you've really had a product market fit, that doesn't serve anyone well.
All right, well, hopefully everyone heeds that advice. Thank you so much. Rhonda Shrader there, Executive Director of the Berkeley-Haas Entrepreneurship Program.